Today I'm going to make a really simple bread recipe. It's one that I fall back on time and time and again throughout the week. It's a no-knead recipe, so you don't need to knead it on the surface for 10 to 15 minutes. It's just really straightforward and it's really tasty as well. The only things you need to make this are a mug. I'll explain a little bit about the sizes of these in a minute. You need some salt, just regular table salt. I use the Alison Easy Bake yeast and a teaspoon measurer. And then I've got my KitchenAid mixer, which just makes things even easier, to be honest. And I use my dough hook just to sort of combine all the dough together. When you're choosing what mug size you're going to use, the best way to explain it is if you've got a large family and you're cooking for a few and you want the bread to last, use a really large mug. If you're like me and you're only cooking for two, or you don't eat that much bread during the week, then I would just use a really small mug, or even a cup if you want something really little. That's why I really like this recipe. There's no halving the grams of flour and trying to work it out based on how many people you're sort of catering for. So I just use a mug this sort of size, or even smaller than this, depending on what I'm doing. And yeah, it's really straightforward. So I'm going to talk you through as I go through. Today I'm going to use a bit of a mixture of flour. I'm going to do strong white and also a slightly more wholemeal flour. It's got sort of like malt flakes and things in it as well. But you can just use straightforward white strong flour. You can just do wholemeal, but you may have to adjust the timings a little bit with wholemeal because it takes that bit longer to rise, that's all. But the ratios are exactly the same. So I'm just going to measure out. It's 2 1/4 cups of strong flour. So because I'm going to do a mixture, I'm going to do the whole wheat sort of flour first. So I'm just going to measure this out, just bear with me. Don't worry if you get a little bit in the bowl as well, it doesn't really matter if you add a little bit extra. So that's a sort of a full cup, just whack that in. And then I'm going to do 1 1/4 cups of my strong white flour because I want slightly more of that than I do with the whole wheat stuff. So again, just do exactly the same. Pour that out. So that's 1. And then I sort of guess the quarter mark, to be quite honest with you. And some has fallen in as well, and so it is slightly more. So I'd say probably around about that is a quarter. So just whack that in. And that's your flour done. So that's your 2 1/4 cups of flour. For the salt and for the yeast you use your teaspoon measurer. It's quite easy. So I use a heaped teaspoon for this. And it's quite important to keep the yeast and the salt separate if you can, because if you pour salt directly on top of yeast, it can kill it. So this is just roughly about that sort of quantity, and I just put that at one side there. Then for your salt, it's best to probably use, the best way of describing it is you pour your salt into the bottom of your mug, and when it just about covers the bottom, you know you've pretty much got the right amount of salt in there. So I just sprinkle some in, give it a bit of a wiggle, it's nearly done, give it a little bit more. So when you think it's just about covered, you might still see a bit of the mug through, you're pretty much good to go with the salt on that. So you can just tip that out, but tip it out the opposite side to your yeast so then they're not touching. So once you've done that, I then just get my fingers in and I just gently mix at that side with the yeast and gently mixed at that side with the salt. I don't combine them all together just yet for the same reason. It might kill it off, so I just sort of do that. And then at that side I just do that with the salt to try and keep them a bit separate. So the only thing now that you need is lukewarm water. Don't have it too hot, don't have it too cold. The yeast likes it just lukewarm. So all I do, I happen to have 2 mugs exactly the same size, but if you don't, just literally go to your sink, fill up that mug that you've been using with lukewarm water and come over and tip it in. But I have 2 mugs the same size, so this is, you need it nice and full so there's hardly any room left in there. And I just literally tip this straight in. So that's done. And now all I do is I stick the dough hook on, like so, and I'll let that down and I just let it combine all together. So I'll just let it do that and I'll explain what the next step is. So just bear with me a second. So that's all I've done. I've literally just done it, so it's all combined together. As you can see, it is really sticky, but it's supposed to be like that, so that's great. I'm just going to take the dough hook off here so it's easier to see. So what I'm going to do now is just, there is some stuff still stuck to the very side, so just get your hands in. You can wet your hands slightly if you want to stop any dough sticking, but just get your hands dirty for a minute. So all I do is just bring it all together so it's in a rough ball, but like you can see it is a really sticky mixture, but that is how it's supposed to be, so don't worry about that. So just let it so it's in the middle, and all I'm going to do to this now is put on, I've got a silicone lid for my KitchenAid, so instead of using cling film or anything like that, I literally just stick that on the top and let it rise with this on. But what you do, this is called an auto-lyse, so for 30 minutes you leave it in this bowl with this lid on, come back to it, wet your fingers, punch all the air out of it after half an hour, and do exactly the same again, but for a full hour then. So that first half an hour is just helping the yeast and the gluten do what it's supposed to do in bread. And that's it. That's instead of kneading it, it sort of works in a very similar way. So it just takes a little bit more time to do, rather than you having to do it on the surface and knead it for quite a while. This is sort of instead of that. So for 30 minutes you leave it in this bowl, then you punch the air out of it, and then you let it rise for another hour in the bowl. Once it's risen in there, it's then time to shape it, and I use like a basket just to help mine keep its shape, like a baton shaped basket. Once you've put it in there, you let it rise for another hour, and then you're ready to bake. So it does take a little bit of time, but it's a really straightforward recipe, because now I'm just going to leave this to do whatever it's doing and just set my timer on my phone and just come and help it along when it needs it, but you can get on with the rest of your day. Okay, so this has been on now for 30 minutes doing its auto-lyse. I'm just going to open it up and show you exactly what that looks like now. So you just take the lid off, and then inside it's still just a really sticky mixture, as you can see. So all I'm going to do now, oh, it smells good. All I'm going to do now is just wet my fingers. I've just got a little tub of water here, just helps the dough not to stick too much. And I just push from one side down into the middle, keep wetting your fingers, then from the back into the middle, and you'll notice actually it does feel quite a bit different to the way it did when you first did it. You can see the gluten strands are sort of forming quite well there, and again just from that side. So just keep knocking the air out and folding it over on top of itself, and keep wetting your hands as and when you need, and you will see that it is actually holding its shape slightly better into a ball, whereas before it was just a real sticky gloopy mess and it wouldn't really hold its shape very well at all. But you can feel a difference in that quite a lot actually, which is great. And I've got bits of malt flakes in mine, but those are the bits. So again, you just shape it into a ball. I've just knocked the air out of it. This helps to build the gluten strands. And then I just put this back on, and I let that prove for another hour. And once that, you'll notice quite a considerable difference after this next hour. It will have risen quite a lot more, and then it'll be ready for the shaping. So again, I'm going to stop this video and then I will show you the next stage when we're ready. Right, okay, we've hit the proving stage. So this has been in here for now an hour. I'm just going to take the lid off and just show you what that dough actually looks like now, because it's risen quite a lot. So this is, just to be careful not to knock any of the air out just yet before I've shown you what it looks like. So you can see in here the dough has risen loads. It's definitely doubled in size. And the next stage of this now is to shape this loaf and then prove it again for another hour. So I'm just going to show you how what I use to sort of prove mine on this stage. I use a proving basket like this, but you can take this fabric off and you can just leave it with the ridged bowl underneath if you want to. But what you do is you just flour this quite heavily, or the batten if you're not using the fabric inside. And then I just put that to one side while I'm shaping the loaf, and then you actually prove your loaf in this whilst it's sort of holding that shape, and then you bake it on a baking tray. You don't bake it in here, this is just for proving it. But if you don't have one of these, that's fine. I've only just recently purchased this. You can just do this shaping and leave it on a baking tray to prove, and then you just put it straight in the oven. But this just, I quite like this because you know that it's going to be a certain shape and you know it's going to be a certain size. Just excuse the cat. So yeah, I'm just going to show you how, I'm just going to literally put plain flour in here just to give you an idea of what I do. So I'm just watching the camera to make sure you can actually see this, you see. Okay, so I did have a flour shaker, which is very useful. However, the handle snapped off mine and I could never actually get any flour out of it. So I've chucked that away and I'm going to buy myself a new one. So yeah, just a fairly even coating of flour all inside there, and then just pop that to one side for now. So again, heavily flour your surface because this will be really sticky. So I'm just going to sprinkle some flour on here, roughly. It will need a reasonable amount. Like, you might want to also get some out of this as you're doing it, just to stop it from being as sticky. And I have a scraper that I use to get my dough out of here, so I'm just going to get that out to show you. It's a DIY thing. You can buy these from B&Q, plasterers and all sorts. This is really useful though. It actually helps clean the surface afterwards as well. You can get all the dough off the kitchen top. So all I'm going to do, it's quite heavy this bowl, but I'm just going to scrape it out here with my dough scraper. And you can see all the gluten's formed and it's looking really nice now. It's quite spongy in texture now. So get what you can out of here. And I'm just going to pop this on the side, out of the way. And you can see here, it's still quite sticky, but it's definitely looking more a spongy texture. So at this point, I actually sprinkle a little bit of flour on the top of this as well to help it not stick. Now I've got rings on. I take those off only because you get loads of dough stuck in your rings if you don't. So what I do is I use my knuckles and I just flatten this out. So you're knocking the air out of this into a sort of pancake shape, as so. And then the next stage is to sort of stretch that dough over the top of itself. So again, stretch it from this side over the top, and then I do the same again but from the opposite side, and then the same again, like so. So that's the first stage. You've got a bit more of a parcel. At this point, bring a bit of flour in if it's sticking. So now what I do is something very similar again, but I go from corner to corner. So I'm bringing the corner in on itself, and the same again. Turn it around if you want to, make it easier. Corner in. This is what it's doing, is it's stretching the dough and it's creating quite a tight skin on the top. This is obviously the underside at the moment. So you can see on the top, you're getting a slightly smoother skin on that surface. So do I just keep going with that for a little bit until I get consistency of what I think it should look like, and I feel like the dough's tight enough. Again, there's probably loads of pros out there who do it very differently to me, but this is what's always worked for me, so I sort of stick with it. Now I'm going to roll this over on itself so it creates like a nice neat little batten. This is the way I do it. So I start from here and I put my fingers here, and you're sort of folding in on yourself. It is sticky, but you do sort of want the dough to stick to itself. So as you can see, it's sort of rolling up into a sausage shape. Again, what I tend to do at this point is I just tuck the ends in just a little bit so you don't get the seam, and just carry on doing that until it's rolled over completely onto itself. And I've got malt flakes in mine, but you can see it's sort of a nice neat batten shape. I tend to roll mine a little bit, put a little bit more flour around here, because you don't want this seam to come apart. So I actually pinch mine a little bit there, just to stop the seam from opening back up. But if your dough is really sticky, you might not need to do this stage. And then I just keep maybe just gently rolling the batten shape until that seam is pretty much gone. So if you're using a proving basket like I am, make sure the underside, so where you fix the seam, is on the top, because at the end of this you're going to tip that out, so then the bit that's at the bottom actually becomes the top, and this bit is underneath. If you're going to be just literally proving this as it is on a baking tray, turn it the right way around and pop that on a baking tray, because then you're just going to be putting that straight into the oven. But if you're doing it in a proving basket like me, you need to put the underside on the top. So this is what I'm going to do here. You can see that. So I'm just lifting it up like so and just place it so bottom side up, because then you're going to tip it up when it's ready to bake. And then all I do, and you can do the same whether you're just doing it in here or on a baking tray, is I've got a large plastic bag. I think this might have even been a delivery bag at some point. I've just taped up the holes that are in it. And all I do is I put it inside, like so. I get one of those bag clips, you know, those food clips. I'll just show you this. You can blow into the bag a little bit if you feel like it's not going to get much air. And then all I do is I sort of tightly wrap it up so it creates a nice air bubble in there, so the dough's not going to stick to anything. And then I just use a food clip on that and leave it like that. So that's how I shaped it. Like I said, if you don't have a proving basket, just leave it on a baking tray, a floured baking tray, so it doesn't stick. And then this takes another hour. So once this is done, and once this has been proved for another hour, it's then ready to bake. I'll go through that again. So I'm going to stop the video here, and then obviously I will video again once we're ready to put it in the oven. Right, okay, this has been proving now for about an hour, and as you can see it's risen loads in size, so I am going to just take this off just to show you that properly. It's in the bag. It's risen loads. My kitchen has been quite warm over the time it's been proving, so that helps as well. But as you can see, there it is, looking nice and big. So you remember how small it looked before it went in the bag, so that's definitely proved to double the size. So the thing I forgot to mention before was I tend to put my oven on about 20 minutes before this is due to be ready. So after 40 minutes on the timer, put the oven on, and then it's at temperature, put it on at 210, and then it's at temperature for when it's actually ready. So this is going to be the underneath of this bread. So I've just pre-floured a baking tray, like that. So now what I'm going to do is just going to tip it out onto here. So what I tend to do is just hold it, because it doesn't come out straight away, but it still has to be fairly quick. And I just tip it like so, and then pull off gently, and you can see it's keeping its shape relatively well there. So what I tend to do at this point is just kind of even out, if you want to, the flour just a little bit, because obviously in the proving basket the flour was sort of more in certain areas than it was in others, but if you're not bothered about that, then just don't bother doing that part. And then you need to score this now. So basically, about that reflection, just trying to find the best place for this, but it doesn't matter. Basically, you can either do it lengthways, you can do any patterns you like. I'm not an expert at scoring, but I tend to like a three stripe across the top method. So you can buy proper razors and things for doing this, but I don't have one of those, so I just use quite a short but a very, very, very sharp knife, and that tends to work better for me. If it's too long a blade, I can't get much control over it. So but all I do is this. So I tend to do one slash to start with, and then again, and then a third time. But then if you want a slightly deeper cut, which I do really, I tend to just go over that one more time. Again, I have no idea if this is the correct way of scoring bread, but it's worked for me, so I just stick with it. So it's dead easy. You can do like 2 lines lengthways, 1 across the middle. You could do a crisscross pattern. Honestly, you could do anything you want with that, but this is just to keep it simple, just to show you. So that's what it looks like. It is starting to sort of settle a bit, so I'm just going to pop this straight in the oven. And it was at 210, and now I'm going to set my timer for about 35 minutes. Once the timer's gone and get it out, knock on the bottom to check if it's hollow or it sounds hollow, and then your bread is done. So I will post up a video when this is coming out of the oven. Okay, so it's been in for just under 35 minutes. I'm just about to get them out now, and then I'm just going to knock on the bottom to check if it's done. That's good. Okay, so here it is. Looks pretty good. I'm just going to pick it up and give it a quick of a knock on the bottom. Sounds pretty hollow to me. Right, so there you go. Bread is done. So that's just a video I decided to do of the whole process of bread making from start to finish, and hopefully it'll give you the incentive to have a go at your own, because the smell in this kitchen is awesome. So yeah, enjoy, and I hope this video has been of some help.